Um, okay, so today I'm gonna talk about a book that was written in fucking 1950s when the digital era was nothing but an idea that was in the minds of people that were on on the very, very first row of technology and science. Nowadays, we have a lot of information about several things because we live in a, a much more developed digital era. But because we have smartphones, we cannot function without computers, and we're fucking suckers for anything digital, and that's great. But in the 50s, when this book was first published, it's I, Robert by Isaac Asimov, um, this was not the case, and that's the most striking part about this book. So, a good science fiction, it's a good philosophical novel. Why? Because it addresses the ethical, moral, and even practical problems that happen or entail the future. Or, yeah, because, and basically, this is about AI, so artificial intelligence, and you have many questions that would arise if you start thinking about this shit, right? And in this book, it was written for the first time the three laws of robotics that even until today I think it's very much on the front row, let's say. We still use it till this day, and that's very interesting. And it's about basically how we understand logically and the importance of logic, like mathematical logic, behind all of these things. And it's so weird because when we study math, we don't really understand the depth of the things that we're studying. Like these things, when we study like laws of math, like theorems, we are not really understanding the core of this. It's not really clearly understood, but it goes so much into every aspect of our life that it defines how we understand intelligence and what will happen if we intelligent human things or beings create a machine that imitates this intelligence. And that's the thing. So this is a set of like short stories that just answer different questions about those problems that will arise. And the last one, which is quite interesting, I'm going to start from the last one, and it's really about economy, and that's something that I just like to think and ponder about, because one of the main problems or the main mysteries or the main things about economy is that, or the market economy, is that there is this problem of knowledge. Like the reason why the free market is the best thing that has ever happened to our society in terms of economics, and it's the best way we have encountered, even though it's not perfect, that we have encountered to like interexchange the goods and services that we have, or just share things. It's because there's no way to know, one, how human beings will react, and how the prices will go, because we value things so differently and we don't know that. I mean, that's a problem. And also because there is no way, we have not encountered a way in which a human being or a set of human beings that could like just decide for the rest and make it for the best. That's not something that can happen, and it's very inefficient, and it costs us too much because it has been tried to guide the economy centrally, and it didn't work, and it hasn't worked because of this, because it's impossible to know all the little things that people will like, how will people behave, because ultimately economy is a science or a discipline, let's say, about behavior. And that's so weird. Like, for example, there is this short story that's called I, Pencil, that's so great, because and I encourage everyone to read it, because it just shows how a pencil is made. And it's made of so many parts, and all of these parts are really not related to each other, like one another. And the producer of the metal that has the pencil, or the rubber, or the carbon, or the wood, they do not need to communicate to each other in order to fabricate this pencil in the first place. So they just do rubber, or they just do metal, or they just produce, and then yeah. So it's very complicated, and the forces of demand and supply are weird, are difficult to predict. And every time we have tried historically to predict them and to actually guide the economy in that fashion, it has like failed. It has just produced poverty and hunger. So the free market is something that it produces things that we need, and it produces wealth, and it produces a lot of other things that are not nice, and we have to I don't know, address those problems in another fashion. But the thing is that that's the best thing that we have developed as a society. But then what would happen if we create a machine that can make that calculation? Because what we know that machines can do that we can't, it's compute very fast. And that's the difference. Like, the problem with machines so far is that creativity is very difficult to imitate. So that's one thing. But they can compute like 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 times faster than a human brain, and it has not the human error. So what would happen if we create a machine where we just supply the information, and they decide where these ideas or where the resources will locate, and they will produce everything that is needed by everyone? And that's a very tricky question, because it's like intruding in the actual will of the people. Like, we like to think about us, about like our individuality as very peculiar, very unique, and very ours. Like, I like thinking that when I choose to read this book, I am the one making this decision. I mean, when I purchased this book, who told me to do it? Like, I like to think that it's me, and it's all the things that I've learned like during my lifetime. But is it, if a machine can supply my needs better than me, so how can that be possible? And maybe there is. Maybe if I don't know, I mean, logically it is possible, right? So it's about this, basically. And there are many other problems, like what would happen if a robot can read your mind? And it's so interesting because in one of the stories, this is a case where robots can read your mind, but because they have this condition of the robotics rules, one of the robotics rules is that they cannot damage any human being, even though they ask them to do it. So in this short story, the machine just reacts by telling you what you want to listen, and that's you know that's it talks to us about the nature of truth and the nature of what we really want and our desires and what is good for us. And these are like the moral questions, what's good and bad. These are difficult questions, and how can a robot or a machine just give you the answer to that? So, and then there is a story where the machines create a religion and one of them believes it's like, or comes to the conclusion, to the logical conclusion, that the best thing for the truth, it's about him being some sort of messiah. Is that how you pronounce it? Or then another one forms a military group, or then another one that is very interesting. It's about how like robots are so much like a human being that it's so difficult to differentiate if one is a robot or a human being. And then what would this very smart person has a car accident, and then he creates this robot to live his life, and he starts being into politics and stuff, and all of these things. And you start thinking about what would be the laws about around this, and it's so amazing. And I enjoyed reading these things. I don't think it's very deep. It just asks a lot of questions. It just poses too many questions, which is what smart people do, actually, in my opinion. Like, smart people ask questions more than answer them. And that's how we evolve, like, in our civilization. So, of course, Isaac Asimov is like a fucking genius. He was like a Renaissance man. He was a biochemist that was a science fiction writer, but also he wrote a lot about history, and he wrote many like essays about science and philosophy and the role of science in our society and so on and so forth. So yeah, so much worth reading. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars because, as I said, I feel it's kind of superficial, but it's entertaining and it's well written and it has the important questions. So yeah, and I like the fact that he, like, everything revolves around this woman that it's a robot psychologist. So it's so interesting to me to see that the reason why they can at some point talk or communicate with the robots is because one of the companies, let's say, that created this robot had the patent to create personalities, and the reason that they, the fact that they had personalities was the reason why we could communicate to these robots and like have that type of give and take thing. So it's amazing. It's a great read. It took me a lot of time to read it just because I was not going through the best moment in my life, but it's very easy to read and he writes very simply, and yeah, kudos. And I loved it. I Robot by Isaac Asimov. And no, I do not remember having watched the movie, and I'm pretty sure it has nothing or very little to do with the book. So, and look at that. Like, I don't see, you can see the drawing very well, but it's such a nice drawing. The hand, like, this is so artistic. The hand, the fact that you can have like a hand that can like grab things, that's very poetic. So bye.